Hello everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining me today. 안녕하세요, 여러분. 오늘도 봐주셔서 많이 감사드립니다. In today's video, I'd like to talk about a topic that I personally find really interesting, and that is idioms, specifically Korean idioms. I think that idioms are such an interesting insight into a language, into a culture. Idioms vary so much from language to language, country to country, and yet there are some places where idioms overlap, and I just think that it's fascinating. In addition, for second language learners, if you really want to up your game when it comes to language proficiency, getting a couple of idioms under your belt can be really useful. Just from personal experience, people are really impressed when you use idioms correctly, and it can make you sound a lot more, I don't want to say more proficient than you are, but it is a nice little cherry on top if you already have some degree of language proficiency. So, I got this book a couple of years ago, and this is a dictionary of Korean idioms. Dictionary of Korean idioms. 한국어 관용어 사전. 한국어 관용어 사전. And I definitely have not read it cover to cover, but I have picked up some interesting phrases. So today I'd like to share a couple of my favorites with you. But first, let's talk a little bit about idioms. Korean has a couple different types of idiomatic phrases. The first is called 관용어, and this is just an idiom. 관용어 is idiom. 속담 is a proverb. 속담 is a proverb. These have some sort of historical nature. They may be Confucian in origin. And then we have 사자성어. And 사자성어 are 4-character phrases. 사자성어 are 4-character phrases. These come from classical Chinese, and they are always 4 syllables long. So we have 관용어, 속담, 사자성어 are all different kinds of idiomatic phrases that you might see in Korean. This dictionary is really helpful in that it labels whether something is considered an idiom, a proverb, or a Sino-Korean phrase. That's those 4-character phrases. And it also provides translations into English as to the meaning. So this is a really helpful resource if you're trying to learn turns of phrase that you might not find in a typical textbook in Korean. Alright, so let's start in alphabetical order. And in Korean, the first letter of the alphabet is 기역. 기역. So a G sound. And I know exactly which one I'm looking for. Okay. So this is 개구리 올챙이 쪽 생각 못한다. 개구리 올챙이 쪽 생각 못한다. And it means the frog doesn't remember his tadpole days. The frog doesn't remember his tadpole days. What do you think that means? It means something like, this says to forget about one's lesser days after becoming successful. So essentially, you can say this to someone when they are bragging, or when they are showing off, or when they are talking down about someone who is not as good as them. So if someone was, I think this is really applicable to language learning. Say you have someone who is very good at a language and they are maybe talking bad about someone who isn't as good as them. You could say 개구리 올챙이 쪽 생각 못한다. Meaning like, you used to be like that, don't you remember? Kind of like, be humble, remember where you came from, and know that not everyone is in the same place as you, kind of thing. But it's a humbling expression, and I think it's really good for language learning. You know, it's easy to forget how much hard work you put into something, or where you started, and to just think back to your tadpole days, and remember where you started and how far you've come. So that is 개구리 올챙이 쪽 생각 못한다. Let's look at the next one. I have a bookmark here and I don't remember why, so let's figure out what's on that page. Let's see what's on this page. Oh, I know what it is. This is 가는 말이 고와야 오는 말이 곱다. 가는 말이 고와야 오는 말이 곱다. That means outgoing words should be pretty for the incoming words to be pretty, or going words are pretty for coming words to be pretty. And that means that if you want to have people say nice things to you, then you should say nice things to other people. Or if you want people to treat you nicely, you should treat them nicely first. 가는 말이 고와야 오는 말이 곱다. This says one must treat others well if one wants to be treated well in return, or essentially do unto others as you would have them do unto you. This is a very commonly used expression. It's often one of the first idioms that people learn when they are learning idioms. So it can be very useful to use or understand because it is a commonly used, what does it say? It says this is a proverb. 가는 말이 고와야 오는 말이 곱다. What else do I have marked? I have surprisingly few bookmarks in here. But I have one that I want to find. Should be in the 시옷. Canada Basa. See if I have it bookmarked. Yes. Oh, this is a different one than I thought I had bookmarked, but I also love this one. This is 소단계 3년이면 풍어를 옮는다. 소단계 3년이면 풍어를 옮는다. Which means the schoolhouse dog recites the primer after 3 years. The schoolhouse dog recites the primer after 3 years. 소단계 3년이면 풍어를 옮는다. And this essentially means to learn by osmosis, that one can absorb learning by being in an environment for long enough. I really like this idiom because it relates to how I learned Korean. I lived in Korea while I was in high school. And while I was taking language classes, I also just absorbed so much from my environment. So often when people ask me, how did you get so good at Korean? Which people tell me all the time. When people ask me, how did you learn Korean? I'll often respond, 소단계 3년이면 풍어를 옮는 게 마련이다. Just like, of course, a schoolhouse dog can recite the primer after 3 years. Just saying, like I learned by osmosis, I learned from my environment. So that's an idiom that I personally use a lot. But the other one that I'm looking for is also, it's the first one in the S's. It's the first one in the S's. It says 사공이 많으면 배가 산으로 간다. 사공이 많으면 배가 산으로 간다. Which essentially translates to many sailors take a boat up the mountain. Or if there are many sailors, the boat goes up the mountain. What do you think that means? I ask because I used to think that it meant the opposite of what it actually means. So, 사공이 많으면 배가 산으로 간다 essentially is the same thing as too many cooks spoil the broth, or too many cooks in the kitchen. Like if there are too many people on a task, it can go haywire. And I used to think that it meant the opposite. I thought that it meant if you have a big team, anything is possible. Like you can even carry a boat up a mountainside. Like you could do a really hard, impossible task, but it actually means the opposite. So I was using it the wrong way for a little bit. 사공이 많으면 배가 산으로 간다. 사공이 많으면 배가 산으로 간다. 사공이 많으면 배가 산으로 간다. Too many cooks in the kitchen spoil the broth is essentially what it means. let's find an example of a 사자성어. I think I know which one I'm looking for. 사자성어. The 4-word phrases. Yes, okay, here it is. This is 통문소답. 통문소답, which means literally East question, West answer. East question, West answer. And this means when you ask someone a question and they respond with something completely irrelevant, you can say 통문소답. If you ask someone, let's see what example it gives. So the example here is 고기는 많이 잡았어? Did you catch a lot of fish? Answer is 한 2시간 됐어. It's been about 2 hours. And then the next person says 고기 많이 잡았냐니까 왜 통문소답을 하고 그래? I asked if you'd caught any fish. What's with the non sequiturs? So it's essentially to give a non sequitur, but I think it's such an interesting kind of poetic way to put it. I asked you a question from the east. Why are you giving me an answer from the west? 통문소답 왜 그래? So that's an example of a 사자성어, a four-word idiom or a 4-character phrase that comes from classical Chinese. Another example that I think is interesting is very commonly used, and this is 일석이조, which literally means 1 stone, 2 birds. And I'm sure you can guess what that means. It's the same as to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. 일석이조. 2 birds, 1 stone. I think it's interesting that that word exists, or that idiom exists in 2 completely different languages. I haven't looked it up, but I'd be curious to know if actually the 2 languages influenced each other when it came to developing that idiom, or if they just both sprang up organically, because both have that same imagery of 2 birds, 1 stone. Korean also has a native Korean way of saying the same idiom, which is 쾅 먹고 알 먹다. I'll spell that one out. So that idiom is 콩 먹고 알 먹다. And this means to eat the bird and the egg. So it's the same thing of like you capture the bird and you get the egg along with it. And this has the same meaning as 일석이조. 일석이조 is literally catch 2 birds with 1 stone. So there's kind of this native Korean way to say it, and this Sino-Korean way to say it, which is using Chinese characters. Another idiom that I really like, that I learned very recently, I learned it actually just the last time I was reading through this book, which I do occasionally for fun, is, let's see if I can find it. Yes, okay, so there's a lot of idioms about water. There's a lot of idioms about water. But this is a proverb that says 물에 물 탄 듯, 술에 술 탄 듯. 물에 물 탄 듯, 술에 술 탄 듯. Which literally means as if water has been mixed with water and liquor with liquor. And I like this one because it's kind of rude. It's used to describe someone who seems to possess no definite opinions or is dull. So you specifically use this to describe people who are just bland or dull. 물에 물 탄 듯, 술에 술 탄 듯. It's as if you've mixed water with water or liquor with liquor. There's no fundamental change. Nothing has happened. So you ask someone their opinion and they give you just this really boring or dull response. You can say you've just mixed water with water. Like, that was nothing. That doesn't mean anything. Or that's just so boring. I can't imagine using this in person because it just seems kind of rude. But I think it's interesting that it exists. I have some more bookmarks in here, and I'm not quite sure why I've bookmarked these pages. So let's find out together. Let's see. Oh, I know what this says. Okay. 호랑이도 제 말이 하면 온다. 호랑이도 제 말이 하면 온다. Which means even tigers come when people talk about them. And this, you could use this the same way as you might say, speak of the devil. 아, 호랑이도 제 말하면 온다. Like if you're talking about someone and they just enter the room, it's the same way as you would use speak of the devil. Speak of the devil and he shall appear. So this example is 다들 여기 모여서 뭐해? What are you guys doing all here huddled up like that? And B says, 아, 호랑이도 제 말하면 온다더니 너 마침 잘 왔다. Wow, speak of the devil, you got here just in time. So when you're talking about someone and they suddenly show up, you'd say, wow, even tigers come when people talk about them. And this is another commonly used expression, which is, I think, why I bookmarked it. I think I put these bookmarks in a long time ago, and I think I just marked idioms that I already know to just like remind myself that I know them. I don't know what this says. I don't know why I bookmarked this page. Okay, well, there's nothing that interesting there. Not to say that there aren't other interesting idioms. Let's find a new idiom together. This will be a brand new idiom that I am learning for the first time. We can try and guess the meaning together. Let's pick one at random. Okay. Let's see. These are all boring. Oh, this is, I guess this is an idiom. But 눈이 높이다 means to raise one's eyes, or one's eye, like to raise one's eyes. You can also just say, I think, 눈이 높다. If you say that someone is like 눈이 높다, if you say someone has raised eyes, it means that they have high standards. 눈이 높구나. You have really high standards. And so if you 눈이 높이다, it means that you are raising your eyes and you're raising your standards. So let's see. 눈이 높다 is high standards. And 눈이 높이다 is raise your standards. So if you say that someone is 눈이 높다, they have high eyes, means that they have high standards. And if you say 눈이 높이라 would be like raise your standards, raise the bar. 눈이 높이다 is the act of raising your standards, and 눈이 높다 is like the state of having high standards. I think there's one more idiom that I would like to share, if I can find it, if I can remember it. I think it was another 사자성어. Oh no, I know what it was. It's just 간이 크다. 간이 크다 means to have a big liver. If you say someone has 큰 간, or 간이 크구나, that means that they have a big liver, and that means that they are bold and courageous. Someone has a big liver, they are very courageous. Kind of like, oh, like you have guts, that's a gutsy person. And I think it's just interesting culturally that the liver is associated with courage or strength, when that's not an association that exists in English. I wouldn't say, like, you can say someone is gutsy, but you wouldn't say they have a big liver. So I think that that's just interesting culturally. I will leave it here for now. If you found this interesting, I may do a round 2 and go through even more idioms. Maybe we can learn some more idioms together. If you speak another language, or even if you don't, I would love to hear what your favorite idioms are in your language or a language that you're learning. I think they are such an interesting cultural insight to a different way of viewing the world. And thank you for listening as I shared some of my favorite idioms. I will see you in the next video. But for now, good night. Good night. Good night.